I'm Jason Hartman, and I'd like to invite you to our very first two-day conference in beautiful Hawaii. Many of our attendees are making a vacation out of this event. You will learn the most innovative strategies for real estate investing available today. We have helped thousands of people invest in properties around the U.S., and we can help you do it too. So I hope you'll join us, and happy investing. Bitcoin, blockchain, ICOs, Ethereum, and all the rest. Are cryptocurrencies the 21st century unicorn, a speculative bubble, or the future of money? The CryptoCast will help you understand the rise, the fall of digital currency, the highs, the highlights, the potential, and the lows, the scams, and pitfalls. I'm your host, Jason Hartman, and we'll talk with some of the biggest names in the space. CryptoCast is your resource for all things crypto. Let's go. Hey, it's my pleasure to welcome Bill Ottman to the show. He is founder of Minds.com. And, you know, there are so many abuses in the world of these tech giants. They are making us the product. We are giving up our freedom, our information. You know, there's an old saying, don't build your house on rented land. And we've seen as these tech companies have invoked all sorts of disgusting censorship, where they have kicked people off their networks because they don't agree with their Marxist ideas. There's just some changes that need to happen. So we're going to talk about a blockchain-based social network and getting control of our data and so forth. Bill, welcome. How you doing?
Thanks for having me, Jason. I'm doing great.
Good to have you. You're New York City, right?
Right outside.
Okay, fantastic. So let's talk about the problem here for a moment. I don't think enough of the world is conscious of the problem. What is the problem?
The problem has a few prongs. So I think there's a transparency pillar that none of them have because they all have proprietary software. We're fully open source, so meaning that you can't inspect their code and see what those applications are even doing to you in the first place. So that's
right.
Number one.
Okay, so wait. Let's just unpack that for a minute.
Okay.
So basically, if you're searching something on Google, you have no idea why you're seeing the results you're seeing. If you're searching something on Facebook, Twitter, anything else, same problem. Of course, with a search engine, it's a much bigger, broader problem because it's the whole internet you're searching. Is there something else you want to say about that pillar?
Yes, so it has to do with not being able to understand why you're seeing what you're seeing, and also understanding how these companies are surveilling us and tracking us around the internet. You know, even when we're not on their websites, Facebook and Google are following us around. So, you know, that is another dimension to the transparency.
Got it. Okay, what's the next pillar?
The next would be the surveillance in general. These companies have a surveillance by default. So we do not track anybody by default, certainly. I think that there's an argument that if you want to be fed suggested content, then you could opt into that type of thing. But on Facebook, there's no way to stop them from following you around and feeding you content based on any number of factors, from your browser history to your zip code to your geolocation. I mean, everything. So you cannot even know how they're surveilling you because we can't look at their code. And even, to be honest, even if you could, they probably wouldn't let you opt out. So that's the surveillance element. Do you want to dig into that?
No, we'll come back to that one. I think everybody kind of understands, at least in concept, the surveillance problem. But I think there's bigger problems than that. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Jump over to the next pillar.
The next is the algorithm manipulation and suppression of reach. This is the soft form of censorship. And then you get into the hard form of censorship with straight out, you know, ridiculous content policies and outright bannings. But the soft censorship comes into play with algorithm manipulation, where when you post, say you have 10,000 fans. On Facebook, only about 3% of those fans are going to see your post organically. And then their algorithm, based on thousands of variables, is going to dictate how much more engagement you receive. That is ridiculous. You should be reaching 100% of your followers by default everywhere. And all the other networks are starting to do this kind of thing too. And it has to do with them prioritizing their ads and prioritizing different content that they want you to see as opposed to what you want to see.
And we've all heard, hopefully now, about the ghosting that's going on, where you post something on Facebook or Twitter and nobody sees it. But you don't know that. You don't know why nobody's seeing it. I mean, post something critical of Twitter or Facebook, and you'll get like a couple of likes. Whereas you post what you had for lunch, you'll get 100 likes. You know, we all know this is a scam, hopefully.
Yeah, this is the shadow banning. They basically track the types of content, and you get punished more in the algorithm based on your history and things like who you're connected to. Facebook actually has built up a shadow database of users. So there may be, your grandma thinks she doesn't have a Facebook profile. She probably does, because her daughter and her, grandchild both have her phone number, and Facebook has created basically a whole user base that isn't even on yet. That's a whole can of worms. But then the last pillar is, the demonetization and the centralization. So YouTube especially is, there's scandals about content being demonetized unjustly just because it's talking about certain issues. Facebook hardly gives you any way to monetize. What we focused on is, so we built an Ethereum-based cryptocurrency called the Minds token. You earn these tokens every day for your engagement on the network and your participation, and then you can use those tokens to boost your voice and get more views on your content and send to other users. And so we're, simultaneously, the beauty of blockchain and other distributed technologies is that it solves a lot of the censorship issues, the privacy issues, the transparency issues. So we're starting to play with Ethereum, and we also started a prototype for a fully decentralized architecture that utilizes a framework called DAT protocol, which is peer-to-peer hosted content, sort of torrent style. Yeah, it's just exciting stuff. I think that, the web is, there's almost a renaissance happening with regards to decentralization and a lot of like these freedom-oriented philosophies.
Right, yeah. Okay, anything else you want to say about the problem? I want to dig into a couple things on that.
No, please.
Yeah. Okay, so I have long said that these tech companies, either one or two or all three of these things needs to happen. Number one, and the reason is these companies are bigger than governments. The First Amendment was put into place by the framers of our country, really, and its whole rule of law to protect people from the government. But when companies become larger than governments and ostensibly in their narrow categories more powerful than governments even, maybe not more powerful than the U.S. government, but certainly more powerful than other countries' governments, they are totally abusing people. And the concept here is that you don't have the First Amendment right to use someone else's platform or microphone to spread your free speech, right? But, again, these companies are so large, their scale is so massive that this could have never been envisioned 200 and something years ago, right? They need to be regulated, I think, like utilities. And I'm not one for regulation, okay? But either that needs to happen or their algorithms need to be made public and open source so everybody can see, why what's happening is happening. Or they need to be just broken up under antitrust laws, or all of the above. It's just beyond ridiculous that any company could control 60 to 70% of the world's internet traffic. That is insane. That is absolutely insane. It's not freedom-oriented. It's not free speech-oriented. It's insanity. And it's a private company that won't answer the phone. You have basically no recourse. They can de-index you. They can ruin your business overnight. It's unbelievable. This cannot be allowed to exist the way it does. Something needs to change.
Absolutely. I think there's a number of fronts to attack it, and I think that regulation is certainly an option. We just have to make sure that the regulation is very carefully crafted, because a lot of times legislators just don't understand technology, and they will create laws that, maybe even with good intentions, that have really horrible side effects. But I think the utility argument is important, and that comes back to the ISPs are not getting in trouble for the content for the most part because they're free from intermediary liability. And so we've adopted a set of principles called the Manila Principles, which were outlined by the Electronic Frontier Foundation. And
EFF, yeah.
EFF, it has to do with within the law in the U.S. Obviously we're going to respect the law and, anything that it can't be hosting illegal content. But beyond that, there really needs to be less liability on the intermediaries. And because it's just not, you can't police it. And in drawing these distinctions between what is okay and what is not okay, all the stuff that Facebook and Twitter and Google are under fire for, saying, oh, this is hate speech, this is not hate speech. Oh, this 17th century piece of art gets banned because of X reason, or this historical photograph from the Vietnam War gets banned. It's impossible. It is a totally.
Whoa. So you're saying less liability on the platform like Facebook and Google, right? Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay, so they shouldn't be liable for what is posted on their platforms, is what you're saying.
Correct.
Okay, but they already have that immunity under the CDA. I'm going to completely disagree with you here. Now, enlighten me if I'm wrong. But if the New York Times publishes a defamatory piece of content, they're going to be held to account for it. Even if it's not written by them, it's just on their, quote, platform, unquote, because somebody writes an op-ed, okay? Someone from the public writes in, okay? So they didn't even create the content. They just let it show up on their platform. The newspaper is their platform, okay? Just like Facebook, right? So they're going to be liable for that. They're going to get sued.
Yeah, but there's a difference between and this is where the things are getting gray. There's a difference between a newspaper, which is curating content, and a platform which has user-generated content.
I get it. The example I gave you, though, was where the New York Times was receiving user-generated content. So
yeah,
how
but
is that
that went through an editorial process.
Right, but shouldn't Facebook have the same burden of having an editorial process? Because you can just defame anybody, and Facebook can just say, the Communications Decency Act, the most inappropriately named law ever, probably, we're just going to hide behind that and say we're not responsible. I mean, what?
I hear what you're saying. I'm confused, though. I felt like from in the beginning of the conversation, you were saying that the censorship policy was too strict, and now you seem to be saying...
What I'm saying is okay, good question. What I'm saying is that Facebook and the other tech companies censor things that they personally don't like. They censor Alex Jones, for example.
Right.
Okay? Because they don't like him. Because they're left-wing, and, he's, I don't know if he's even right-wing, he's just conspiratorial, okay? But, most people would say he's right-leaning, okay? So that's another debate. But who cares what he says, right? The fact is, they censor him because they don't like him, right? PayPal even censors him, okay, because they don't like him. They canceled his accounts recently. And I'm not saying I agree with the guy either. I'm just saying he should be allowed to speak, okay?
Of course.
Right. But they choose to do that because they don't like him. They're making up an individual decision, which is completely unfair. They have no real standards. There's no court. There's no recourse. You're not going to win suing Facebook. Okay? So that's the problem. But you can sue the New York Times. How come you can sue the New York Times and not Facebook?
Well, their reason, I think, partially for banning him, what had to do with defamatory remarks that he made about, potentially like something involved with Sandy Hook or something.
Yeah,
I certainly don't think that he should have been banned at all. But can you clarify what you mean about the defamation?
I'm saying, if you go post something on Facebook, for example, and you say, you think so-and-so's a crook, right?
Okay.
Facebook may or may not take that down. They'll just, in their star chamber where nobody knows who makes the decision, why they make the decision, they may or may not take it down. If it's left up...
Who should make that decision?
Well, I don't know. Let's explore that, but let me just finish. And say the person posted anonymously. So it's a hit and run, it's a drive-by shooting. You have no right to face your accuser, right? Like normally in our system. And then you go and sue Facebook. Facebook will say, hey, we're not responsible. We're just a platform. We've got the Communications Decency Act, and there's no way we could police our platform, right? So that's what they're going to say. And then you're left with a ruined reputation and no recourse because you don't know who posted it, so you can't go to the poster. Facebook's not going to do anything for you, and you can't get recourse with them. So what these platforms are doing is giving nut jobs a megaphone, okay? And, either they've got to give the megaphone equally and they've got to tell who's behind it, who's yelling, or not. Try and subpoena the information from Facebook. Good luck getting it. They'll object strenuously. They'll fight your subpoenas. They'll quash them. How do you reconcile that? I'm not saying I have the answer, but I do have the question.
Yeah, I mean, I have a similar question. I think that the whole defamation and slander area is very complex. And, one person's slander is another person's, just basic criticism. So, from the perspective of the platform, I think that what the Manila Principles say is that there needs to be a court order in order to force the company to take it down, because otherwise what you have is the company having to make that subjective decision, which is going to bring up all sorts of subjectivity and errors. So, I mean, I tend to agree with the basic idea that there should be some sort of, legal or court order to take it down, and then they should have to take it down. But, who is some moderator on Facebook to decide legally what is and is not legal?
Right. So the problem is getting that court order will take you at least 18 months,
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to cost you easily $75,000, $100,000 or more. And what's disgusting is that Facebook won't even give you the information of who made the post. That's appalling. Okay, fine. If, Facebook says, look, we're going to leave it up because we believe in free speech, as if they have any real principles besides their own greed. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg just abuses everybody's privacy left and right and, jokes about it and thinks everybody's an idiot for giving them their information. Apparently we all are, because we're all giving it to them. Okay? There's no principle here that they have. I don't think they have any principle other than their own greed. And so they should at least provide you with the information and not let people hide anonymously like that. You should be able to redress the government anonymously, but not another private citizen. Okay?
Well, it depends on if they're a public figure or not.
No, I know all about the law. I know that law. Okay, I own two media companies. Okay, I get it. We have to deal with this stuff. So I totally understand what you're saying, and I know these rules. I'm just saying that this internet freedom thing is great, and I love it in concept, but you should at least be able, if you're in a cafe and you're having a cup of coffee and someone in a car drives by and fires shots at you, at least there's a way to try and identify them. You have a description of the car, the license plate. On the internet, you have nothing, and the companies won't give it to you.
Right.
Okay? That is appalling.
It's very nuanced, and I completely agree with what you're saying. And at the same time, anonymity is, while in one sense can be dangerous with respect to trolls and, this type of thing that we're talking about right now, the right to anonymity is actually, the UN and the EFF and a lot of energy has been looked into this, and it is arguably a human right.
It is a human right against a government that can persecute you. I agree completely. You should be able to take shots at the government without fear of being put in prison or killed or tortured. Okay? But when it's another citizen, it's an equal footing. That citizen can't persecute you the way that government can. There's a difference.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly open to the conversation. It just becomes strange. So, I mean, I think it's worth digging into, because these are sort of some problems that we deal with sometimes, and I am trying to find the best way.
Think of it in the old days, okay? See, what I'm excited about, and I want you to talk about your platform, is that maybe the blockchain holds people accountable. Okay, you need to be accountable for your actions. In the old days, I mean, look, you remember in grade school, right? Certainly we've all had the experience of someone talking behind your back, right? And saying mean things about you. I mean, every human's, I'm sure, had that experience. I certainly have, right? But at least then you can talk to people and interview them and say, hey, who told you that? And then you can go to that person and say, hey, why'd you say that? That was wrong. On the internet, it's just a whole different mess.
Right. It just becomes, because you say someone that another person considers slander against them, then the intermediary should be forced to hand over the personal information of that person so that you can contact them. I think that I understand the perspective. I don't think it's as simple as that. Because
it's never simple.
Never simple. I'm telling you, this is an impossible problem because, you mentioned the blockchain. How can this potentially help us solve it? So yes, the blockchain is an immutable ledger where, everything is to a degree, but so you have pitfalls of the blockchain too, where if you publish everything on the blockchain, which you cannot even publish heavy content on the blockchain really, but it's immutable. You cannot delete from a blockchain. So if somebody posts something slanderous or some illegal content to the blockchain, you cannot take it down. Everything is there forever. So you have this paradox again between certain benefits that you're going to gain by the transparency, by the immutability, by the accountability, but you're also, not able to take that down. Now, there's use cases where you want that, and there's use cases where you don't. So everything on our network is not on the blockchain. Only, certain transactional data for our payment system, our advertising system, our crowdfunding system. But, a lot of the data is on regular centralized databases. We're working on a more fully decentralized system, but it's just important that people are aware when they're dealing with distributed systems like torrents and blockchains that once it's in the wild, it's in the wild. And so this is the internet. I mean, the internet is sort of the Wild West.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. But it needs to be organized and there needs to be recourses for things. Look, you can't have freedom without responsibility. This is the problem with today's culture. Everybody wants something for free. They don't want to do anything for it, and they want to get all the benefits of it. The two go hand in hand. And if you want lots of internet freedom, fine. I agree. I think anybody should be able to say pretty much anything. I believe in that, conceptually at least. But you have to be accountable for what you say. With freedom comes responsibility.
Yeah, it just becomes, where's the line between...
the line is identity.
Legal criticism.
The line is identity. That's all you need. Say whatever you want, but we got to know who said it. And if you want to say something about the government, because the government is able to persecute you, then you should be able to speak anonymously. Anonymous speech is protected in the First Amendment. But the First Amendment is only about the relationship between people and government. That's it. It's not about people and people. It's about people and government. It says you should be able to say whatever you want against the government and redress the government, and the press is free and the government can't stop it, and I love that. I absolutely love it. It's, I get goosebumps talking about it.
I'm not sure that I would have to read the First Amendment again, but I don't think that it is only about the government. I think that it expands beyond that. But I do see what you're saying.
It's not about commercial speech. It's complicated. Look, there are lawyers who spend their entire career on First Amendment issues. It's all they do. Right. It's complicated. This is complicated stuff.
For instance, with violence and threats of violence. I mean, the Supreme Court, the test that they run is called the Brandenburg test, and it has to do with, is the violent threat imminent and specific?
Right.
So, in that regard, the Supreme Court is saying that the speech is protected as long as it is not an imminent and specific threat. So I would have to imagine that if the Supreme Court is upholding a ruling, that's pretty extreme. They're still allowing, essentially threats as long as it's, if someone goes on and says that they want to hurt the president or something,
Well, the president, I think, has an exclusion. But, if a good example would be Maxine Waters and her recent calls for violence, right? Mm-hmm. So do you have the right to go on TV, especially as a politician, and say, you should beat up Trump supporters if you're Maxine Waters, right? Which is not exactly what she said. I get it. But, I don't remember what she said. But it was pretty insightful, right? And, during the LA riots, she said, no justice, no peace, when the Rodney King thing was going on. So that's inciting violence. That is not legal. I mean, of course you have to unpack it, and I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know how to, but yeah, there are, this is the reason we have people and judges to work all this stuff out, but you've got to give them a framework within which to work, and the framework of the current internet is very problematic.
I mean, the legal costs argument that you brought up is really important, and I think maybe that there's very fruitful almost business model in that to, bring down the cost of reporting things and allowing a regular citizen to be able to get some sort of legal representation in this kind of an ecosystem.
Well, this is why I invented freecourt.com, so people could have a free online court system to resolve disputes, and the jury is the crowd, and then they would decide. So, sorry about the plug.
I didn't know. No, I like that. I like that. I have to check it out.
We'll talk about it off air,
okay.
because you will like it. I can tell you'll like it, and we'll talk about the blockchain and how it would apply to free court. But listen, give out your website and tell us a little bit about what your plan is and what your goal is. I don't mean to get so sidetracked here on this.
No, I like it. Yeah. This is exact. These are the conversations that have to happen because it's so complex and it needs to be unpacked. But so yeah, I mean, Minds. You can go to minds.com. We're on iOS and Android, and we sort of feel like hybrid, kind of between Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter. And we're just trying to be standing on a much more solid foundation of principles with regards to transparency. I mean, everything we do is open source. You can go take our source code right now. You can start your own app with it if you want, change it, modify it, inspect it. And, peer review is essential for public accountability. We, are encrypting everything. But the most popular thing for, anyone who's listening and, might be interested in exploring a new option is that this reward system that we built. So it's so hard to get your voice heard on the internet these days. And, we firsthand experienced the algorithm manipulation on Facebook and, lost the reach of we had millions of followers on all our pages. So on Minds, even though we're a fraction of the size, we're like 1.5 million users or something. But users are finding it's easier to be heard and to gain a following on Minds than on the major social networks because we have this vent out of the void, and you can use the tokens that you earn or you can buy them and you can be heard. And that's what people really, or at least a growing movement of people on the internet want. I know some people just
in other words, you can buy access. Right.
You can but you can also earn access.
Yeah, you can buy it or you can earn it. Got it.
On Facebook, you cannot earn. And you'll see people with 50 Twitter followers for 10 years, 10,000 posts. They work hard. They, probably have some good things to say.
Yeah, and then Twitter kills them in a day.
Twitter kills them in a day. And so we, right now, a token will give you 1,000 impressions on whatever content you boost. And that has just really been satisfying for us to, see people get that feedback from the community when they haven't been able to get it on other networks, get through the algorithm. We don't have algorithms in the newsfeed. It's all pure and raw, chronological. So, I think that that's a key thing that we've been working on. More peer-to-peer economies. There's a whole crowdfunding system. So you can have people subscribe to you monthly for tokens. They can tip you. And, we're just looking for a new system that rewards people for their contributions as opposed to, basically being stomped on after spending years on these other networks.
These other networks. Here's one more concept for you, okay? If Facebook and Google were considered utilities and Twitter was a utility, I don't believe the phone company as a utility or the electric company, if they don't like you, I don't believe they're allowed to cut off your service.
Mm-hmm.
Why should Google and Facebook and Twitter and PayPal even be allowed to cut off your service because they don't like you? It would be fine. The typical libertarian view that doesn't hold water, and look, I identify as a libertarian, I want you to know that, okay, is this typical crap that, well, it's a free market, just go somewhere else. You don't go somewhere else when these companies have crowded everything out of the marketplace. Even Starbucks, Okay, one time I posted on Facebook a picture of a yogurt at Starbucks. Absolutely disgusting. A little 4-ounce cup of yogurt had 26 grams of added sugar. I mean,
Ugh.
Starbucks is selling poison. It should not be allowed. And then all my libertarian friends that I philosophically want to say I agree with started posting, well, just go somewhere else, go somewhere else. So guess what I did the next morning when I wanted to go to a coffee shop? I looked it up on Apple Maps. The one other coffee shop that was within 15 minutes of my hotel in Tampa, Florida at the time, was closed. It wasn't even there. Okay? Because Starbucks has crowded everybody out. All of this free market stuff would be great if the way the financial markets worked didn't have this winner-take-all society. This stuff does not work when you have giant duopolies. There is no free market. There is no consumer choice. It would be great to say, okay, Facebook sucks. They don't like me. Screw them. I'm going to go somewhere else. But the fact is, there's just a few big companies, and they have all the audience. So it just doesn't work.
How do you think Facebook and Google would feel about that? In some senses, it seems like it would make things easier for platforms because they could default and say, look, this is the law. We can't ban that person. It wouldn't be legal. I mean, it seems like that's so much more sensible.
Yeah, they shouldn't be allowed to ban them. They should have to be regulated like utilities. A utility company doesn't get to ban people, so far as I know. You know, if you call the electric company and tell them how much you hate them, they don't get to shut off your electricity as long as you pay the bill.
Yep. And it gets, with social media, it gets extremely dangerous because, you know, the slippery slope just continues. We saw what happened with, as you mentioned before, Alex Jones. And, you know, when people's payment systems are cut off just for,
they're dead. He's dead.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Well, though there is the Streisand effect, which is interesting, where he's actually, you know, his websites are getting all-time high traffic because there's so much controversy.
And wait till Cloudflare cuts him off, or his hosting provider, GoDaddy, or whoever is his host, right? They can do it too.
True.
I mean, these companies are too big to fail, okay? And they need to be busted up, regulated, or exposed. The algorithms need to be public.
Yes.
So, yeah, one or all three of those things needs to happen.
This is good stuff. So, hey, look, let's make sure I'll get you some tokens on Minds. I'd love to
all right, thanks.
get your guys' brand fired up. And anyone who's out there listening, you can find me minds.com/Ottman, Ottman. And yeah, let's keep the conversation going.
Okay, good, stimulating conversation. Thanks for enduring it. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. Be sure to check out the show's specific website and our general website, hartmanmedia.com, for appropriate disclaimers and terms of service. Remember that guest opinions are their own, and if you require specific legal or tax advice or advice in any other specialized area, please consult an appropriate professional. And we also very much appreciate you reviewing the show. Please go to iTunes or Stitcher Radio or whatever platform you're using and write a review for the show. We would very much appreciate that. And be sure to make it official and subscribe so you do not miss any episodes. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.